I mean, I must say, I don't think... obviously, this is a subjective thing, whoever opines on it, but the BBC, from my point of view, really is a frightened institution and really is feeling very defensive and very ganged up upon, and doesn't feel that it has the powers to defend itself. It's an institution that at times in the last couple of years has felt like it's under siege, has felt like because of some unwise remarks that were made in a Radio 2 broadcast that should never have gone out, that the whole of the nation has turned against everything the BBC does or has ever done. And that's not the case, but that is how it's felt at times. So, and maybe that leads to some unfortunate decisions being made, in an attempt to defend it. But it's definitely, if it's perceived as sort of strong and aggressive by some of its competitors, that's ironic, because inside it feels weak and under siege. But I suppose the question, I can see I can understand what you mean in terms of the BBC Trust. The circumstances under which it was set up, I think, are pretty disgraceful. I'm not sure, however, that the governors that existed before didn't have exactly the same problems that you claim the Trust has. So I don't see that the change from the governors to the Trust would be a step away from what you want. But my question still is, the people who then regulate the BBC, who appoints them, who are they? And if they're not there, if they are not constitutionally also acting in the interests of the BBC, whose interests are they acting? Obviously, hopefully, the public's interests, but who, they're not elected, presumably, so who appoints them?
Well, I don't know who, I can't remember off the top of my head who appoints the people to the BBC Trust, but I assume it's approved by the Prime Minister. The BBC is a public organisation in that sense, but I don't think, I can't imagine, what would you be seeking to do? All one is seeking to do is to have objective regulation that allows a clear separation between the BBC itself, which has a Director General and possibly a separate chairman. At the moment, the chairman and Director General are the same person, who run the BBC and who are free to run the BBC how they see fit and are free to defend their decisions in running the BBC. It is absolutely kind of inherent in the institution that because it's funded by the licence fee payer and because it's therefore funded by the public, that there will always be a debate in a way that there just wouldn't be with other organisations about its output. There will always, as you said in your opening remarks, you're absolutely spot on. If you're paying your licence fee and you see something you don't like, you feel personally aggrieved. Charles Moore certainly feels personally aggrieved that output is allowed. So there will always be that nature of the debate. All we're saying is that there should be that the BBC can run itself and look after itself, and there should be a separate regulator that's able to take into account the impact that its services have on its competitors. Now, the difficulty here is not whether the BBC Trust is working de facto, but the point is that if you've got the chairman of the BBC Trust going out and advocating for the BBC and campaigning for the BBC, then when the BBC Trust is considering various BBC services and their impact on competitors, you're not entirely sure whether that is an independent process, and that seems to me to be needs to be an independent process.
The BBC, for the younger members of the audience, for which this sounds like a sort of, just hang in there, because this is how this is how the programmes you like, this is where they come from. These funny arrangements is where they come from. The BBC website clearly, which gets public money, the licence fee, has been an incredible success, has been an enormous success in America, has been where unexpectedly, in a information regime in America which has become both diminished in terms of the amount of news that goes into it, but also more and more partisan. So big surprise, BBC website does very well in America. You can see why anybody trying to set up a website now thinks that the BBC is a commercial competitor. But do you use it? The public interest and commercial competitors are slightly different issues. And secondly, the existence of the BBC has not stopped, some competitors growing hugely. But for instance, Sky. So I think one has to what's your view? I mean, it's easy to say that the BBC is the main competitor, but it has.
Yes, I suppose
You're perfectly entitled. I mean, look, Sky is regulated. I mean, Sky is regulated by Ofcom, and Ofcom is about to put forward its own very controversial recommendations about the future of paid television, which will, I suspect, I haven't seen them, send Sky up the wall. So the idea that all other commercial competitors aren't regulated is wrong. Of course they are, and if there is a perception that they are too market dominant, they can be there can be regulatory solutions to that. So that's the point there. No one's suggesting at all that the BBC should close its website or anything like it. What one is saying is simply that whenever you have a conversation, particularly with anyone who owns a national newspaper, that they will say to you, it is extremely hard for us to work out a strategy about how to monetize, I suppose is the word one wants to use, how to monetize our website, how to make money from our website, when basically the default position for anyone is they can go to the BBC website, which will always be free. Now that is, from the consumer's point of view, that's great, fine, it's a fantastic website and it's free. I'm just saying that I think policymakers should take account of that if you're looking for plurality on the net, and you should take account. And the reason I said I thought it was good that the BBC had recognised that in its strategy review was, first of all, to be nice to the BBC, to say thank you, rather than going up and giving them a kicking, and also to say that if you should recognise, you do recognise, your reach on the web is enormous and has an impact. Now, I don't know the figures, but people talk about the BBC spending 120 million pounds a year on its website, and I can't believe that a typical national newspaper would be able to spend more than 2 or 3 million on its website, and that seems to me slightly out of kilter. But because we don't know the figures, we can't debate. A lot of that might be to do with how it's configured in other territories and so on. In which case, I wouldn't particularly, again, I'm straying into specifics here, which is always dangerous. But I wouldn't particularly regard the BBC's presence in America as a concern for national newspapers over here. But then again, The Guardian is very successful in America as well.